You guys gave me all the like usual fluff favorite game type things, and now all of a sudden I gotta ask like soul searching situations. This is some bullshit. Do you think N64/GameCube on Switch Online is still a possibility or just HD remasters? This has been one of the things that a lot of people have been hoping to get some kind of reveal for after the whole Mario All-Star situation where they're going to be removed at the end of March. People were hoping that maybe that was because we were going to see some kind of Switch Online service adding N64 GameCube games, so on and so forth. I feel like right now the writing is on the wall that that's not going to happen. I mean, obviously there's a much heavier focus right now on just re-releasing and porting a lot of those titles. Like we're seeing right now with Skyward Sword coming out, there's a lot of rumors we're going to get a Wind Waker and Twilight Princess re-release on the Switch as well. I think we're going to be seeing much more of these standalone releases and not a proper, oh, these games are added to Switch Online. I would love to see maybe something like Virtual Console where just a lot more of the libraries get added as individual titles that you can buy. That would be fantastic, and not just necessarily the greatest hits that people are looking for, like Zelda and Mario titles. But I don't think the way that we have SNES and NES represented in Switch Online, I don't see that happening for later systems. What I do think is a possibility, not necessarily likely, but if Nintendo did want to expand Nintendo Switch Online to include more libraries like the NES and SNES, what I think could happen before other mainline consoles like the N64 is Game Boy games, going all the way from Game Boy to Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance. This is a form of support that we saw happen a little bit on the 3DS, and there's a lot of opportunities for some amazing games being made available digitally on the Nintendo Switch Online library. And really, the way Nintendo handled it with the Nintendo and Super Nintendo spacing them out as far as they did, they could possibly take this route doing Game Boy and Game Boy Color for 1 year, and then a full year later, tap into that Game Boy Advance market. But there's a lot of currently big franchises that have older entries available on those devices that could be great to have on the Switch. Not only from some of the really obvious franchises like Legend of Zelda, Mario, some great Metroid portable games, Fire Emblem, at least in the West, got its start on the GBA. There's a lot of good titles there we can choose from. Not to mention, you know, one of the longest demanded things people have wanted to see localized in the West, Mother 3. In all honesty, I actually do think that Nintendo is done as far as what platforms are being represented on Nintendo Switch Online, but if they were to keep expanding it, I really do think Game Boy is more likely the route they would take rather than pushing ahead with more traditional consoles, because again, a lot of those titles are seeing individual ports. What did you like and dislike about the 2/17/21 Nintendo Direct? So I did put up my reactions video to the Direct itself, which just kind of gave you guys my play-by-play reaction as it was happening, but I didn't really give a full after-the-fact breakdown of it. I think the simplest way to really put it for me is the fact that, personally, I honestly really loved it, but it's because, again, I have a really big history in terms of being a fan of JRPGs, and Square had a very heavy presence at this Direct. I loved seeing Legend of Mana getting ported for the system. I'm excited again to see Saga Frontier. The reveal of Triangle Strategy is basically everything I've been waiting on for a new game from Square in a long time, so a lot of the stuff really called out to me specifically, and I'm super excited about it. That being said, I could definitely see how that Direct in a lot of ways didn't necessarily disappoint people, but didn't really live up to the expectations or hopes they were having, especially after how long it's been since we had a Direct. One of the biggest things definitely being the fact that they didn't really officially reference that this is the 35th anniversary of Zelda, instead just focusing on Skyward Sword. But as we've already seen, there's been a lot of rumors already circulating that we're going to have more 35th anniversary specific news come down in the future, and that is something I do very much believe in. I think that there's more likely going to be a 35th anniversary focused Direct down the line that will talk about more than just simply Skyward Sword. That's my 2 cents on it, at least. So I loved it, but I get how it wasn't for everyone, but I think Nintendo has more in store outside of just what was talked about there. Real quick, by the way, as you guys may have noticed, a lot of these questions are pulled from Twitter. That's really where I'm most active for asking for Q&A stuff, so make sure to follow me there if you want to ask something for a future Q&A. I try to do these roughly once every month, so if you don't want to miss out on the next one, also make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet. Favorite console of all time and your favorite games on that console? I find myself normally falling between one of two systems, the SNES and the PS1. The reason why it's those two in particular is that I'm a big fan of JRPGs, and those systems really do represent like the golden era of when a lot of companies were pumping out some great games. The older Final Fantasy titles, Breath of Fire, Suikoden, way more things than I can really list right now. Between the two of those, kind of PS1, I think, which is funny because I actually never owned one growing up. I actually went straight to PS2, which I used primarily for borrowing PS1 games from my friends to play that I'd always heard about and didn't actually get to play firsthand before. Probably that. It's tough, but at least right now, answering that question, That's what I'm going with. I know her. That's not a question, but thank you. Do you think Sony will make another Vita? No, probably not. I mean, I did a video recently about how much I want them to make another Vita. I think there is a lot of potential in a new handheld from PlayStation, but ultimately, I was part of a niche audience of people who really liked the Vita and would use it. I still use it on occasion. That is not the majority of people. And so based on how well the Vita sold, as well as what Sony's emphasis has been so far in terms of other projects they're working on, I don't think that's gonna happen. But I would love for them to prove me wrong. What is your favorite Mega Man series and which entry in that series? That's actually a little tough. I was a really big fan of the Mega Man X series growing up. I played through all of those games as I was getting older. That was the one that really resonated with me, and in particular for that one, the original Mega Man X. Addy! I know Addy. What have been the highest and lowest points of making videos? Also, love your content for a long time. Oh boy, that's getting deep. It's tough right now because I feel like I'm actually working towards a higher moment right now. I've been really starting to reapproach how I want to make some content, and I'm also reaching out a lot more to other people. I feel like for a long time I was very focused on just kind of making videos and keeping them coming out, which works to an extent, but I feel like I kind of let myself be a little disconnected from everything else, which I'm working on a lot, and I've actually been in a really great place mentally this year because of that fact. Before that though, in terms of just focusing on pushing videos out, I'm really happy with one particular video we did a couple years back where I was focused on talking about the history of the development of the D-pad with the Game & Watch. And that was just a really fun video, and I think it's one that did a really good job of walking not only the kind of production value that sometimes people really focus on for our projects, but more importantly, it had some great history stuff that I was really glad to kind of expose more people to, because that's actually the stuff I sometimes feel a lot more passionate about, instead of just telling you my top 5 Switch controllers. As far as lowest, let's just go ahead and say pretty much all of 2020. I mean, the end part was pretty good with like new systems coming out, that was fun, but oh man, what a year that was. What's up with the beanie? I keep telling you guys, we'll hit 1 million subs, then you'll find out. And then coming from someone who named themselves after the default name for the Persona 3 protagonist, or at least based on how they named him in the manga, your personal backstory with gaming, how you first found out about gaming, first gaming console, favorite game series, etc. That's a long question to answer, because really my backstory in gaming is more or less I've been gaming as long as I can remember. I'm a younger sibling, and so growing up with a brother that's 6 years older than me, there was already an NES in the household well before I was going to be able to use it properly. And so as far back as I can remember, I have had access to games. I can't tell you what the very first system I played on was, because I really don't remember. My series of events from that young aren't very clear to me. I know I spent a lot of time on the original Game Boy. I did try using the NES, although I was probably very bad at what games I did play. SNES and N64 were definitely ones where they kind of started to become more like my system, and it was more time that I put in for those directly. But I can't give you a great answer on like what game was for sure my introduction. Which JRPG do you recommend for someone who hasn't played any? Ooh, that's a good question. It kind of depends a little bit on what about JRPGs are interesting to you. Like, what have you seen of that genre that makes you go like, oh, I kind of want to try that out? Because I think there are certain games that do a better job of capturing certain aspects of the genre, and there's always that question of, do you play something that's an old classic, or do you play something that's like a later game that's maybe a little more accessible for some people? But Chrono Trigger is one that I think does really well. One, because while it does have a sequel, it's not a part of some gigantic franchise, and so you don't have to worry about being familiar with any particular tropes or anything. And again, I think it is a game that has aged extremely well. If you're more curious about maybe more strategy or tactic style RPGs, I'm actually a really big fan of a lot of the Fire Emblem games. There are other tactics games like Final Fantasy Tactics that I think are better and more interesting, but they also have a much steeper learning curve. Fire Emblem's a lot more friendly up front. Three Houses on the Switch is a great choice, or if you have a 3DS, Awakening is an excellent one as well, and I think that's actually my personal favorite as far as someone's first game in that franchise. What console do you wish had a longer or more developed life cycle, and why? The Wii U. I think the Wii U had a lot of great potential. It just ran into the problem of terrible advertising. The actual UI and everything for the system was a little bit of a mess. I mean, I hated the fact that it took like 20 seconds to load any menu outside of launching a game, which got very tiring over time. But the concept of what you could do with the dual screen setup having the tablet was amazing. Nintendo Land was a great showcase of the potential here, but no games really ever fully took advantage of it. Like at most you'd get maybe a menu screen on the tablet, which was fine, but there's definitely more interesting, cool things that could have been done. Vita. That's another system that I absolutely love, but clearly didn't do super great. The main answer for a lot of people whenever this question comes out, the Dreamcast. I mean, that system had so much amazing potential for its time, and it got just completely derailed because DVDs. Thoughts on Halo Infinite? Do you have faith in 343 after what they pulled with Halo 5 and Master Chief Collection? Should people have faith in them? And of course, do you think Infinite will be good? I generally consider myself an optimist. I usually don't like to think ill of a game pre-release. I'm very much sort of like, we'll see what happens when it launches and go with reaction then. And so, look, obviously there have been some delays and things on the background of Halo Infinite. It was supposed to be a launch title, now it's going to be something that comes out later this year, or maybe even later, who knows? And I will say that while there are some people who definitely do take a bit of an ill omen when a game gets pushed back, I would definitely prefer that the game get the time it actually needs, rather than get rushed out to release just for the sake of being released. So, look, is it going to be a great game or not? I don't know yet, but I am looking forward to learning more about it over time, and I'm hopeful it'll definitely live up to the expectations a lot of people have, and maybe bring a little more love back to the Halo universe. Performance mode or resolution mode? This varies a little bit depending on what those specifics are, because not all games share the same requirements of what is performance and what is resolution, outside of obviously that resolution tends to push resolution and performance pushes frame rate. Generally, performance. Some specific situations, I might do resolution instead, especially if it's a game where I feel like frame rate isn't as important, like let's say a turn-based RPG or something. But generally, when given the option, I go performance mode very easily over it. I'll do quality if maybe it's a very flat 30 frames, but in general, I definitely prefer higher frame rate when that's the choice. And I'm really happy more games are offering that as an option, because for the longest time, games were pretty much always aimed at higher resolution with a lower frame rate, and we're starting to see that be not the default norm, and I love that.